Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about controller play for a different game, World of Warcraft. Shadowlands is the latest expansion to be released later this month, but the pre-patch has been out and with it so has a new built-in controller support. So I'm going to take a look at it. Playing World of Warcraft on controller has already been a thing people do, but they were using a third-party program called WoW Mapper and then an add-on called Console Board. That's actually how I was playing on controller for World of Warcraft Classic. So, can the new built-in support rival what the fanbase has created? Well, no. But it is a good start and can be a good foundation to allow the add-ons to become even better. So, first things first, how do you enable it? Well, to do that you need to type in a command. There is no way to configure it via the game menu. It's a console command, so that means there are two ways to input it. You can just type it directly into the chat, but you will get absolutely no feedback about whether you typed it in correctly or anything like that. Or you can enable the console, and then you can access it via the tilde key. I actually prefer this method. When you enable the controller for the first time, it's going to create some default keybinds and settings. Technically speaking, you are good to start. Well, there will be some issues, but you're sort of good to start. So let's go over what those default keybinds are. I have a nice little picture so that we don't have to look at the keybinds menu. And here you can see the legend. So I'm going to have green stripes for when there is a modifier that's not active. I'm going to have red cross stripes for when the modifier is active. And I'm going to have blue diagonal strikes for a button that is not mapped. So if you wanted, you could add your own mapping. It could be entirely unmapped, such as the extra buttons on the PS4 controller, or it could be partially unmapped where maybe it has mapping like without a modifier, but it doesn't have it with a modifier, or at least not that particular one. So without a modifier, it's going to have your world map on options. For those of you on the Xbox controller, that would be start. And it's going to have escape, which is cancel, and your main menu on the touchpad. For those of you on Xbox, that would be back. You're going to have your enemy tab targeting on your D-pad up and down. You're going to have your set focus on the D-pad left, and interact. So once you've selected something that you want to interact with, is on your D-pad right. You may or may not need it depending on how you change your configuration later on. The right click is going to be center camera. Your X is going to be unbound, which defaults to jump. We're going to talk about that in a bit. And then circle, triangle, and square are mapped to the hotbar. I will have the hotbar separately once we've gone through all of the various non-hotbar related bindings. You will also notice that your modifiers are on L1 and L2, L2 being shift, L1 being control, and your right side, R1 and R2, when you are in cursor mode, will be used as your left and right click, and when you are not in cursor mode, will be used as an actual button that's mapped to your hotbar. Next up, these are the bindings when you have L2 pressed. So you'll notice now your options becomes your bags. That's all of them, not just a single one. I know with bag, it's actually all bags. The right click becomes zoom in. And then the D-pad becomes a friendly tap target for up and down. So that's literally anything that's friendly. That's allies, so party members, alliance members, and NPCs, as long as they're friendly. You can have your D-pad left for using your focus target. So the unmodified was to set your focus target. This one is to actually target your focus target. And that was D-pad left. And your D-pad right is to assist. So if you have a friendly person targeted, now you can assist them by targeting whatever they're targeting. Next up, we have for when you press L1, but not L2. Almost everything here, as long as it's actually mapped, goes to the hotbar. but you do have zoom out on the right click and character on options. And last but not least, we have L2 and L1 together, so shift and control. And once again, pretty much everything that's actually mapped goes to the hotbar, and options goes to spellbook. Funny thing is, at least on the PS4 controller, that didn't work because of the way they wrote it and the way that they register the keys. So I had to force rebind that to do that because it just wasn't working. And those are all of the default setups, and you're probably already thinking about some things you should probably have that are not on there. For example, targeting party members. Sure, you can use the friendly targeting, go right ahead, but that is based on what you can see, and that can be a bit annoying. You may want to have separately, and still keep that, your target party member 1, 2, 3, and 4. Unfortunately, World of Warcraft doesn't have like Final Fantasy XIV's just scroll through the party list up and down, so it would have to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. At least not without add-ons. Moving on, let's talk about the good and bad things regarding the new default setup. Well, first let's talk about the bad things. The first one is that the display is honestly ugly and not friendly at all. You cannot see the entire name. It uses letters entirely, so S is square and T for triangle. And if you have regular keybinds set ahead of it, it's going to show you that instead. That's why it says 1, 2, 3, 4 on my primary, and to change that I need to actually remove the binding or maybe add it as the second binding. But yeah, it's not good. Let's just say there's a reason that when I took a screenshot of the default hotbar keybinds, I used an add-on to fix this display. Second issue, the keybinds are inadequate. So I went over this a tiny bit when I was talking about the default keybinds, because not having targeting individual party members or even auto-run, these are oversized that really do belong in a default setup. I understand that people may want to remove them after, but in a default setup to get people going, they really should be there. But that's not even the biggest offender. The biggest one is that hotbar 1 button 1 is not bound by default at all. So the first action you get will not even work until you either move it or you bind this button. I would recommend actually binding it because this is also used for vehicle actions and you don't have a huge amount of control over those. So when I reached the quest to drive a boar, there was no binding for using its trample action on hotbar 1 action 1. Yeah. The third issue is that it does not have anything to handle actions that are not immediately acted upon. So by that I mean, for grand target AoEs, if you leave it exactly as default, you don't change anything, good luck with that. I mean it, good luck. You probably won't be able to. Instead, you will need to either use macros, or you will need to turn on cursor centering. And the reason I say that is that you do need to actually use the mouse to place them down. And in order to reach the mouse, or as I called it before, cursor mode, you need to cancel. So you're going to cancel your AoE in order to be able to place your AoE. That doesn't work, it just doesn't. So using the always center means you can use your mouse even anytime, just by using that centering, and you use the camera to kind of move it around. It does mean that you're going to lose a few button presses, because now those left and right mouse clicks just always are used as left and right mouse clicks, so you do need to think about that. But as I mentioned, the other option is to go with macros. This isn't just for ground targeted AoEs, there's also actions that branch into other actions. So in the case of Warlock, you have this summon action that can become multiple different types of summons. And there's no way built in to activate that using controller. Yeah, So using just the default controller configuration that's available and no add-ons whatsoever, you would be required to use the macro unless you really want to go into cursor mode and select it, which, believe me, that gets old. I tried. It's annoying. So what about the good things? What's really good over this setup compared to, I don't know, let's say Final Fantasy XIV's, because after all, that's what this channel is mostly about. Well, freedom. As much as it's missing many things, and believe me, it is missing many things, there's a reason why I'm still considering console port. Sure, now we're not going to be using WoW Mapper anymore, which is great, but I'm looking at the alpha version of the next version of console port that is going to use all of these built-in features and make a nice UI, fix up how you do things like look around your bag, which right now would be using the cursor and not something nice and simple like the D-pad. But if you take all that aside, this controller setup does actually have more freedom. In Final Fantasy XIV, for example, I wanted to do my autorun as Alt-U and start. No, R2 and start. Yes, R2 and start. And that's not something you can do, not without going to an external program like Steam API and doing it there. In World of Warcraft, I can do that natively. You can pretty much change your configuration however you want. If you end up messing it up, it's your fault, but they'll let you do it. And that's really good for advanced users. So they've actually made a product that's really good for advanced users who are willing to put in all of that time reconfiguring everything, but not a very good default setup for people who maybe don't want to do all that, maybe don't want to have to make macros for the things they didn't think about. And so there's good and there's bad, and between the add-ons that are going to come out in the future and any other changes they're making in the future, it's actually kind of exciting, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens with World of Warcraft on controller. And with that, this is going to be the end of the video. Let me know, are you going to try playing World of Warcraft on controller? I know a lot of you are Final Fantasy XIV fans, so probably not, but if you ever did, is that something you'd want to do? And I'm going to possibly make some controller guides for different classes that are available on World of Warcraft. That might actually be a big undertaking, so I'm still thinking about that, because I would have to make it not just for each class, but each specialization of that class. Oh boy. I'll think about it. I might just do only the ones that I particularly play and not do the others. But yeah, let me know in the comment section if you are planning on trying out World of Warcraft Shadowlands on controller. And with that, bye bye!